the never-ending list of messages, we see that it's 1993, and Joe's not in the best space in his life. His boss is riding him ragged, and if he doesn't land this next big client, he's probably not going to have a job anymore. His ex-wife's giving him hell for not making it to his daughter's 3rd birthday party, not to mention he's late paying child support too. And he's none too happy with himself in general. Can anyone else relate to any bit of that? I'm pretty sure the statistics would show that a good bit of people can relate with at least one of those things. If you can relate with every bit of that, I'm terribly sorry, and hopefully things get better instead of how the rest of this movie goes. That evening, Joe sits down with Newcomb to sell him on his marketing pitch. Newcomb explains that he's going to make a deal with Joe, and he heads out to handle some other business. When he watches the client walk away, he's left at the table with Judy, and he thanks her for playing her part. The more he talks to her, the more she realizes that he's trying to come on to her, and she isn't too happy about it. Neither is Newcomb, who's standing right behind him. Of course, the deal's off now, and Joe goes on a little nice trip of self-sabotage. He walks the streets drunk as a skunk until he comes to a vendor on the side of the street. He buys a toy for his daughter and continues on his journey around town while smoking in the rain. Eventually, he comes to Chucky's bar to beg for another drink, but Chucky tells him to go get some coffee. It's bad when the neighborhood locals all tell you that you promise not to be like this again. When store owners are telling you to go drink coffee instead of spending money in their establishment, they know that you need help at that point. Chucky comes back to the door to check on Joe, and he finds the toy sitting on the sidewalk alone. Joe, on the other hand, wakes up in a hotel bed naked and the shower's running. When he pulls the curtain back, he finds that no one's actually in the shower. He brushes it off and goes back to the room to search for clues. The more he looks around, the more he realizes that most of the hotel room is fake. Fake windows, fake doors, no phone, and nobody else. After he gives up, someone eventually shoves a tray of food through an opening at the bottom of the door. He tries to ask whoever's outside why he's there, but he gets no reply. With each tray of food over time, they give him food and a bottle of alcohol. After one of the weirdest self-pleasuring scenes I've ever seen, gas just gets pumped into the room. This is just terrible, and I would never touch myself again if that's what happened. Joe is semi-awake while people come in and take samples from him, but eventually he comes to and eats his food like normal. When he turns on the TV, he catches a story on the news about his ex-wife being raped and beaten to death, and he's a prime suspect. After some time passes, Joe seems to go crazy as he starts to visualize people that aren't actually there. He even befriends a mouse that comes through a hole in the wall, and he watches as the mouse raises an entire family and leaves. The next day, he checks the tray of food they give him, and he finds the mice served on a platter. After this, it seems as though Joe has had enough, as he slits his wrist with broken mirror pieces. He passes out, and when he comes to, he's shaved and patched up. Suddenly, he notices a camera in the corner of the ceiling, and we see that Cheney is watching him on a monitor. Suddenly, Joe starts to see specials about the murder of his ex-wife, and he gets to watch his daughter Mia grow up happy and healthy. He decides to write a letter to her and change his life. He decides to stop drinking, and he starts writing a list of possible people that would want to keep him locked up. Watching the major world events pass by on the TV as he goes through the years was kind of trippy. Watching history and remembering where you were when it happened is always a weird thing. Then they cut to Pilates workouts and you wonder why you're so invested in the fake TV programs he's watching. Over the years, Joe creates an opening in his bathroom wall, and he finally gets it big enough for him to crawl into. He breaks the grating that leads outside, but before he leaves, he catches another interview of Mia all grown up. He finds out that Mia hates him, but she also wants to know why he did it. When the reporter asks her if she could forgive him, she guesses that she would try. Just then, the room starts to fill with gas. Joe tries to make it out of the room, but it doesn't work. Actually, he ends up waking up in a trunk outside. He goes through all of the belongings that are on his person, and he finds that he has money, sunglasses, and an iPhone that has a timer on it. As he emerges from the trunk, he finds that a woman that was there the night he was kidnapped is also in the field with him. After he chases after her, he eventually comes to a football field, and no one's too keen on him following her. After he knocks all of the men out, he gathers his few belongings and makes his way into town. Here he meets Marie and Dr. Tom. After harassing a homeless man, Joe makes his way to Chucky's bar where he tells Chucky everything.
What are you gonna do, Joe?
Well, that's ominous timing. Think it's time to figure out how Mr. Blocked Number is listening in on conversations. After he answers the phone, Joe hears a voice come through and asks how his first day of freedom's going. The voice ends up telling him that he'll be in touch with a possible way for him to be happy with Mia if he does it right. After the man hangs up, Joe gets Chucky to look up people on his list of possible suspects. After learning how to work a computer, Joe stays up and goes through the extensive list. When you've wronged that many people, I think it's time to rethink your life. I'd almost think that if he made a list of friends, Chucky might be the only person on that list. The next morning, Chucky goes to check on Joe, and he finds him passed out on the floor. After finding a number that has Marie's number on it, Chucky calls her to come and help Joe. She explains that he's dehydrated and malnourished, but he'll be fine. Eventually, Marie decides to go through Joe's belongings, and she reads through Joe's letters for Mia. When Joe wakes up and realizes what she's doing, he gets really defensive, but she assures him that she believes him when he says that he was locked up. Marie agrees to help Joe, and they head out to start going through his list of people that are still alive. Soon, he eliminates a bunch of them as possibilities. It does get a little hard to remember that he's missed so much time sometimes, yet when he starts looking for things like the yellow pages and payphones, it becomes painfully clear. Does anyone still have payphones where they live? After realizing that he's not going to find out anything by going through his list, he decides to try and track his kidnapper by finding the restaurant that sells the dumplings he was fed every day. After trying every restaurant in town, he eventually finds the one that makes his dumplings. And he follows a man that makes a very large order. Oh my god, was he actually alive for all that? I love how Joe doesn't even bother asking questions, he just makes his way through. And if they're next in his path, he just assumes they're guilty. Further in the facility, we see Chaney watching everyone on the monitors. And he eventually opens the door to try and find out why no one's come in with food. Joe's waiting for him and he punches him and ties him to a table where he performs some backyard surgery. After cutting all along his neck, Joe asks him who hired him. But when Chaney tells him that he doesn't know, Joe literally pours salt in his open wounds. Eventually, Chaney tells him about a tape that has a recording of Chaney's first conversation with the client. After hearing that the client bought 20 years of Joe being held, Chaney's men gather outside the door. Joe uses Chaney as a hostage to get past them, but that only gets him so far. After watching this, I think a ball-peen hammer should be a viable option for home defense. He's literally done everything so far with this hammer and a cheap rickety box cutter. Who says you can't get things right on a $2 budget? When he stumbles out of the facility, the man behind all of this pulls up and picks him up. He tells him that he has to take care of himself because the fun is just beginning. And the man drops him off on Chucky's doorstep again. Chucky calls Marie to help him again, and Marie brings Dr. Tom this time. After Joe sees that Marie doesn't tell Tom anything, he feels a lot more at ease. Later that night, Joe gets a call from the man behind it all, but no one answers on the other end. Joe decides to call the number back, and he's surprised to find out that the phone call's answered by another man that's in Chucky's bar. Once Joe realizes what's going on, he attacks the man, but he's quickly stopped since everyone else in the bar works for the man. This was a huge power move moment. To just be chilling in the same bar this whole time and all of a sudden, all the patrons inside rally to keep Joe off of him? And honestly, the way his right hand badass whooped Joe is enough to make me sit down, shut up, and pay attention. This is Adrian, and he takes a quick look at Joe's list of possible suspects. After he rips up the paper, he gives Joe an option. All Joe has to do is answer who he is and why he did what he did within 46 hours. And he'll give him his daughter, a confession, 20 million in diamonds, and a bullet in his own head. He gives Joe an address, and when Joe gets there, he's ambushed by Chaney. Just before Chaney starts to torture Joe, he gets a call from the man that hired him, and he's paid to leave Joe alone. Chaney and his guys take the bag of cash and he's left to help Marie to her feet. Little do they know that Adrian has cameras in the house watching them while his girl caresses his burn scars. Marie helps Joe come up with his next clue, and they go to visit his old headmistress. Once there, Marie goes inside and asks Ms. Burke what she knows about Joe. While the two of them talk, Joe sneaks in the back and looks through his old yearbook. Eventually, he finds Adrian's picture, and they leave. Is all of this seriously the work of a man that was bullied in school? It can't be that simple. I'm definitely going to need a lot more than that as the drive for all of this. I will say Adrian's well prepared though. They go to some cabin somewhere to think about everything and they end up getting it on. Adrian has cameras here already. Plus, all I see here is Wanda though. On top of that, it turns out Adrian is tapping into Joe's phone. Chucky finds out why Adrian's doing this, and he tries to call Joe to tell him. Adrian hears him call someone a whore, and he goes to Chucky's bar to kill him for it. That night, Joe and Marie sneak into his old school, and they pull Adrian's file. He gets a flashback of Adrian's sister, Amanda. As he bullies and embarrasses her, it eventually leads to a memory of catching her getting it on with her father in the greenhouse. I get this is all artistic and necessary, but are we just going to ignore the fact that Marie's somehow just watching this memory like she's in a vision? This isn't a shared mystical moment. She's literally just following him around this abandoned school, and she's making eye contact with memories that aren't hers? It turns out that Adrian's family moved away, and the parents and Amanda were all killed and committed suicide. Adrian made it out, but he was severely injured. When they get off the school grounds, Joe tries to call Chucky, but Marie finds a package in the car that contains Chucky's tongue. Joe and Marie go back to the cabin to prepare for the showdown, and she tries to convince him not to go. Of course, he doesn't listen, and when he gets to Adrian's suite, he's attacked by his woman. Well, that didn't last long. Also, box cutter for the win again. Always make sure to have one handy, apparently. Soon, Adrian shows up, and he assures Joe that Mia's close by. When he asks Joe to answer the two burning questions, Joe tells Adrian his name, and he goes through how all of his gossiping spread through the school and took its toll on the family. What Joe didn't see coming is the fact that Adrian's father killed the family and committed suicide. On top of that, Adrian explained that his father actually did things with all three of them. That's just nasty. No other way to put it, just nasty. After getting all that in the open, Adrian tells Joe that he's won, and Joe asks to be brought to Mia. Adrian takes him to a back room, where he shows him that the crime show he watched for 20 years in his prison room was actually made by Adrian for Joe specifically. When Joe hears Mia playing on the cello, he's immediately overflowing with joy, and he goes to find her. When he finds Mia behind a window, he finds out that it's actually just an actress. Joe starts to beat Adrian, but Adrian wants him to realize that Mia is in fact Marie. As he plays a slideshow of Marie growing up, he ends up playing footage of Joe screwing her earlier that day. When he realizes who she really is, Joe's disgusted and cries out in horror. Joe begs for Adrian to leave her alone and to kill him instead. This is all Adrian's way of making Joe understand what he took from him by exposing the scandal from their childhood.
Heaven make me free of it. The rest is silence.
I'm still not approving of anything that's happened in this movie, and I mean anything. But it is a sad ending. Not approving, though. After Joe leaves, he writes a letter for Marie, and he explains that he's done something unforgivable. She won't ever see him again, and he sends her a package with the duck he was going to give her on her 3rd birthday, along with a bag of diamonds. He also takes diamonds to Cheney, and he pays him to lock him up for the rest of his days. As the tray of food is pushed through the opening in the door, the familiarity brings a smile to Joe's face.